What's going on, guys? Christopher O'Toole here with you guys today, and it's so good to see you guys on this cold January day, or sort of cold January day at least. And so I figured today would be ripe to do a video. Or how does it go with John Miles Davies? Ripe. I can't get it just the way he says it. Of course, I think he's Welsh or something. Anyways, today we are going to be talking about tips for shooting in bright sunlight, okay? Now, I'm sure everybody on the face of the planet, if you're a photographer or cinematographer, you encounter some days where it is just simply too bright to shoot because you have to have certain settings on your cameras in order to get certain results. Of course, if you've been taking videos or pictures for any amount of time, you actually already know that, I'm sure. So I figured I'd stop by and give you guys a few tips on how to beat that bright sunlight outside, whether you're a photographer or a cinematographer. Now, some of these things that I'm going to be talking about may apply more to photography than cinematography, but for the most part, I think these things apply to both cinematographers and photographers. So without any further my ramblings, let's go jump to tip number one, which is LCD monitor brightness. Now, this doesn't have to do with physically changing your camera to fit the outside setting, like I'm going to be talking about. This is just a way that you can help yourself get better results when you're dealing with bright sunlight, with a bright day. Because turning up the brightness on your monitor is going to help you be able to focus better, especially if you're manually focusing. It's going to be able to help see your subject better, whatever your camera sensor is looking at. And so if you just turn your monitor brightness a little bit higher, then that will allow you to just seal off things better in your camera, even if it's bright outside. So turning up your monitor isn't a good thing to do all across the board because, of course, it does take a little bit more battery. But on bright days, I think turning up your monitor is a very good tip so that you can see your subject a little bit better. Now, and tip number two is lens filters. Now, I already talked about this in an earlier video, and so if you saw that video, you may be wondering why I'm talking about it again. But lens filters, if it's bright outside, are an essential, okay? I'd say they're a must if you want to get all the information. Now, yes, if you're dealing with photography and you're shooting in RAW, you can accommodate some of that with turning down the highlights in your photo, and since you've been shooting in RAW, you'll be able to still capture that data. But it's best, if at all possible, to be able to get everything exposed properly as much as possible. Talk about the sky and all the shadows and everything like that. And so if you throw lens filters on there, like an ND or CPL filter, then what will happen is as soon as you throw that ND filter on there, it'll automatically bring the brights in the skies down, and so everything is exposed in your shot. Now, there are some turnbacks to an ND filter, and there are some reasons why you may not want to use them. I won't go into that right now, but there are some reasons why you may not want to use them. But for the most part, an ND filter or CPL filter is going to help you in the long run keep everything a lot darker in your scene, and so that would be something that I would definitely recommend when shooting in a bright atmosphere. Now, another good way to turn down your brightness when shooting in bright sunlight, now this specifically applies to photography more than cinematography, but is turning your shutter speed up. Now, this, of course, wouldn't also work if you're wanting to, say, shoot in falling snow and you want the motion blur, or you want the motion blur from something in your photo. This is not going to work because, of course, turning up the shutter speed will have the shutter open for a lot shorter period of time, and so you won't have that motion blur that you're wanting to capture. But if you're wanting to just take a landscape shot, you don't want any motion blur in it or anything like that, then turning up the shutter speed is also a very good way to turn down the brightness in your atmosphere around it if you don't have a filter to put on your lens. Now, talk a bit more about shutter speed in this video right here. The reason that turning up your shutter speed can turn down the brightness in your atmosphere, or what the camera sees in your atmosphere, is because your shutter's open. As you turn up the shutter speed, say it's at 1/500th of a second, then the shutter is only open for 1/500th of a second, and it only allows that much light into the sensor. So if it's really bright outside, it only allows 1/500th of a second of light to enter the sensor. And therefore, it's going to be a lot darker because not as much light is going to get in because the light doesn't have as long to get into the sensor. So that will result in a darker image. Now, again, if you're shooting cinematography, you probably don't want to do this because, of course, you want your shutter speed to be twice your frame rate so that your motion blur can be right. And so you probably don't want to use this in cinematography. But with photography, this can be a very good way in certain circumstances to turn your environment down a little bit darker so your sensor can see a lot more in your image. And my fourth point is direction of your camera. Now, this isn't obvious, this is probably a given, but you can sometimes run into trouble if you, say, have a thought in mind of where you're wanting to position your subject and your camera would be pointing to the sun, then that would obviously result in a much higher image. And so you'd want to find a different angle maybe on your subject, and so that you can now point your camera sensor away from the sun. Say you're going and shooting, doing a photography session for this family, and you had this certain spot in mind of where to put the family, but then it turns out that on that day you forgot your filters at home or whatever, and you come to the place where you're going to take the photo shoot, and it's really bright outside and the sun is just at the perfectly wrong angle. Well, first off, planning will help that. You plan where the sun wouldn't be exactly shining right into your camera sensor. But also, if it is, then just be creative and think of a new way, of a new place, of a new angle around your subject, where you could replace your subject, or where you could shoot a different angle from it, or something like that. Also, things like lens hoods, things of that nature, can also tone down your image, because a lot of rays aren't coming in from the side and hitting your image and causing different light leaks in your image, and so that'll also result in a much cleaner, darker image. So just bring your lens hoods with you, as well as all the other things. Then you could beat the bright sunlight a lot easier, and because you did all this, you'll result in a much better image than you would have than if you just got out and shot in RAW and then brung down your highlights. Because yes, you can do that, but you won't have as much information in your image as you would if everything in your image was properly exposed. So yeah, that's it for me today, guys. That's it for me. If you guys like this video, click that like button down below. If you have any questions or comments about the subject, or just randomness, drop it down in the comments below. And for more videos on photography and cinematography and vlogging and just all that stuff, click that subscribe button down below. And I will see you guys in the next video.